On today's episode of Space Times Podcast, we have a very special guest, Jeffrey Hill, chairman of SAT Show and executive editor at Via Satellite. He's here to talk to us about the upcoming SAT Show this March, all the exciting times that are going to happen at that conference, and delve a little bit more into the trends and topics we see in the general space industry and how those will crop up at the conference. Jeff Hill, it's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you, Harrison. Thank you, Paul, for having me.
So to start off, let's start big picture, kind of give us the overview. What is SAT Show? Who attends this conference? Why is the conference important compared to other space conferences?
Well, Satellite started back in 1981 as, at that time, like the only trade show for satellite technology for the commercial industry. Back then, it was mostly broadcast enterprise. Today, almost like 44 years later, we have we cover everything involving satellites, every application, every market, and including adjacent space markets. Like, for example, we also cover the launch industry because it's directly tied to the satellite industry, as well as some of the commercial space markets, and also government and military applications. And we also have a tech seminar which covers technology, space and satellite technology research. Today, so we're at about 15,000 attendees from all over the world. The conference is 4 days in March, from the 23rd to the 26th. And it's a global satellite technology show. It's one of the largest in the world, and the only one hosted in DC. So,
Jeff, one of the things that you mentioned was how the satellite industry itself is sort of tied to and dependent upon the launch industry. And there's a lot of other sort of commingling effects there. Like the satellite industry itself is not this sort of standalone monolith of an industry. It's very much dependent and tied to a lot of other industries that all participate in the space economy.
Right.
I'd love to get a better understanding of sort of, what are some of the patterns that you've seen in your time with SAT Show with Satellite that indicate the direction and some of the trends from the more recent years? Have you seen things shift more towards one or more of these other partner industries rather than others? Have you seen different aspects of satellites mature at a rapid or slower rate than others? What are some of the trends that you've seen over the past 5 years?
Well, to go back to something you were saying about how the satellite industry isn't really its own market, and that's true. Satellite isn't as siloed anymore as it used to be. There are people who consider themselves in the telecommunications industry. The satellite and telecommunications industry have really merged. There's very little difference between the two because those two types of networks are intertwined. So the industry, when I say satellite industry, really what I'm talking about are lots of different industries depending on what customers they serve. So if you talk to somebody who, like I said, was providing satellite internet, they would say, well, we're in the maritime industry. We're not really we work with satellite, but we're in the maritime industry, or we're in the space industry, depending on who you talk to. So it is very integrated with others. That's correct. In terms of trends, again, I'm gonna say that this is very application based, right? It depends on I think the trends that change are who the satellite industry serves. And I could go through all of them and that would take a very long time, but I think the trends that you're seeing this year are further integration between cellular and satellite technologies, where commercial cell phones, the ones that you get, your iPhone, your Samsung Galaxy, are becoming much more integrated with satellite networks, where everybody is using satellite for different applications other than just GPS, right? And then in some cases, we have direct to cellular connectivity from satellite direct to cell. That's a big topic, big talking point, because it's a very clear business case. It's not a long-term business case. This is generating revenue now. So that's one trend on the connectivity side. On the the industry, like the supply chain itself, I mean, there was a trend that was everything was going to be small sats. That's not really so much the case anymore. I mean, there's some satellites, and most satellites are getting bigger. Constellations are definitely getting bigger, and other trends that you're seeing are there's a lot of merger and acquisition activity to build multi-orbit satellite systems. So you're seeing like companies that have a strong low Earth orbit portfolio merge with somebody who has a geostationary or even MEO orbit assets. And you're seeing them create these sort of large multi-orbit networks that can seamlessly work with each other. On the government side, the government has a tremendous budget. Like they've got a lot of money to spend. And so right now, government end users are trying to see, like, now is a time they've got the budget to fulfill some of their long-term missions. And you're going to see, what is next generation military SATCOM. I know people throw around the concept of Golden Dome. It's more than just that. It's having like a robust and resilient global military satellite network for the United States, its allies, and global operations. So I mean, the trend there is that there's a huge budget and lots of capabilities out there. I mean, I think those are the major trends, and I'm trying to think about the topics that are going to be defining our general sessions. We have the leading global satellite operators who will kind of walk everybody through the connectivity piece, the multi-orbit piece that I just mentioned. But then we'll also have a general session on Wednesday that outlines what we're talking about as the future space economy. Where do things move beyond just low Earth orbit, right?
Sure.
And there's a whole market. There's a whole range of markets and applications in that arena that are starting to materialize. Whereas before we were saying these things were 20 years in the future, they're getting a little bit closer.
Yeah. This sort of science fiction future of 20 years off is rapidly becoming a 3 to 5 year sort of time horizon, and is much more faction than fiction, if you will. And one of the things that we've spoken about somewhat extensively on this show is the wave of liquidity that's sort of gone hand in hand with this wave of consolidation and, I'll say, partnership to increase capabilities throughout the industry. We sort of expect to see this wave of liquidation events, this wave of consolidation lead to basically another wave of innovation and new participants entering entering as we start to expand and look at more places as well. But
yeah, so
there's also this just quick question that you sort of alluded to, but I mean, the satellite industry is central to the new space economy. It's central to a lot of different things. Do you view the satellite industry more as the parent or the child, so to speak, in a lot of the industry partnerships?
I mean, that'll really depend on what applications we're talking about, right? Like that. I mean,
sure.
I mean, the satellite industry, when I talk about the commercial satellite industry, has a very long heritage, right? Very, very long heritage serving. When I first got into the industry, it was largely a broadcast industry. And, in the connectivity area, I think, it is definitely the parent, maybe. But it really depends, because, these things also developed side by side, and these partnerships and this integration you're seeing kind of happen very organically, naturally. But it's a good question. I really do think that a lot of our the expertise we have in physics around low Earth orbit, around space access, comes from the satellite industry. I mean, I think there's a lot of expertise that gets baked in to the larger space industry that comes from the satellite industries. But yeah, it's a good question. I haven't really thought of it that way.
It could be that, I mean, the parent-child framework might be the wrong way to word it, but I do agree with you that the satellite industry itself is sort of almost an infrastructural component to a lot of the end products and a lot of the actual use cases that they wind up solving. So for telecommunications, the entirety of the satellite industry is in service of telecommunications for a lot of the Earth observation in the same vein, in the same capacity. So for a lot of the commercial side of things, I would agree with your sentiment.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I've tried to do with the satellite show in the years that I've managed it is to bring those other industries, those other connected markets to satellite, and to have satellite take more of a thought leadership role in these discussions with adjacent markets. So again, like when I first started, it was very easy to map out the commercial satellite industry. Very easy. Like you could probably chart it on one piece of paper. And today, it's so integrated with so many different markets. And I've tried to bring those markets to satellite. We have a very large exhibit hall. And our exhibit hall is like a supply chain of creating, building, and launching satellites. So it's very it makes a lot of sense. But then I'm also bringing these other end users, other communities to the show so that we can kind of learn from each other. So one of the things I really enjoy working on our show is that it gives people in our industry a chance to sort of lead those discussions as to where everybody's going together, where all these new partners are going together in their long-term missions.
So you kind of commented on the growth of telecommunications as a business in space. It's long been a business. I know you say you've been around since 1980s, and geocom satellites kind of dominated that industry for 30 years or so. But now we have this proliferation of mega constellations that are kind of replacing that in a lot of ways. We have Starlink that's establishing direct-to-device partnerships with Virgin Media just this last week. We had Mouse Orange a couple weeks ago. Kyivstar announced 3 million direct-to-cell devices. And there's, Star Shield that's kind of been built out of that commercial capability. So I know you have Sat Show separated into two kind of conferences, Satellite and GovMilSpace. I wanted you to kind of go into why are those two separate conferences? They are run at the same time, so obviously you see some crossover here. But is it really fair to kind of distinguish between commercial space and government space these days? And how do you see them kind of changing in collaboration in recent years?
Well, interestingly enough, that decision is more of an events business decision than it is a industry decision. So it's because we're in Washington, D.C., we have a lot of people from government and military circles who come to the show to learn. And we just create a program that's entirely relevant to them. So they have one place to go. We could separate them and have them go all over the place, but it's more of a convenience for a large group of our attendees to know exactly where they have to go. Both the regular conference and the GovMilSpace program are going to talk about a lot of the same things. But what we do is we have those sessions mostly focus on government military applications. So I know what you're saying, and you're right. It really is just because so many of our attendees are in this one market, and it makes it easier for them to know exactly where they have to go.
Gotcha. And I know there's a lot of other when I think government military, it's traditionally been the U.S. government military that I thought about because they're the ones that spend the most money. But in the past year, we've seen a huge expansion across other nations, particularly the EU, and standing up a lot of its capability in smaller countries like Japan and the Middle East and Brazil. So do you see that trend emerging in this conference? Do you see more involvement from other nations? Is the government kind of capabilities they're building up similar to what the U.S. has been doing?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, in addition to the U.S. government's growing budget, and the U.S. government is the largest satellite end user in the world. That's the largest customer out there for all satellite applications. If you had to put them in a list, U.S. government's number one. But in recent times, with the geopolitical situation that is a reality, there's been a lot of talk about every nation having a sovereign satellite system, independent of in some cases the United States, or just independent to their country or independent to their region. And absolutely, we're seeing other spacefaring nations focus on building their own exclusive space or satellite supply chain. And so you'll have a lot. I mean, we are a global show, so we will have people from Europe and Asia and the Middle East and South America and Africa come to talk about these things. And we actually have a one day of the program on Wednesday is dedicated. We have like sessions that are dedicated to specific regions, where they're going to talk about space sovereignty, among other things, for their region. So yeah, absolutely. And Europe specifically, I mean, Europe has at one point, I mean, Europe had a very robust, almost independent space industry that needs to catch up in a lot of different ways. The infrastructure for an industry in Europe, that they need to build it back up, right? In some ways, and speed up to kind of catch up with their peers. And there's this a question for like the European launch industry. Arianespace has been a leading launcher for Europe for many, many, many years, but with as much activity as happening in Europe, like Arianespace alone can't shoulder all of that demand. So you're seeing a lot of attention being paid to building up the European space industry, building up that infrastructure to speed up their access to space. So yeah, absolutely.
Do you see the breakdown? Because there's kind of this trend of space sovereignty that's popping up, and as you said, it's a lot of nations realizing they need their own sovereign supply chain. But we're also seeing a lot of partnerships form that I haven't seen in past years. Like Canada is partnering a lot with Europe. There's cooperation between Japan and Europe, standing up different subsidiaries in each other's countries, and just China launching Middle East satellites, and there's all this sort of new relationships kind of forming. Do you see a lot of that play out on the conference floor? Like it's not just nations talking to their own commercial businesses; it's cross-nation cooperation that's emerging more recently.
Oh, absolutely, yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot of factors that are driving those partnerships into existence. I mean, we could talk about tariffs. We could talk about global trade. We could talk about geopolitical tensions. We could talk about what's happening right now with Iran. So, like, there are a lot of different factors. But what I like about our show is that, yeah, it brings people together from different regions to talk about how they can solve their problems. And in a lot of cases, these are global problems. I mean, independent of the political situation, you do need to have more global. You have to have a wider range of global partners these days. So you can't just rely on one market or one launcher. I mean, you've got to be diverse. It's a global business. And so conferences like Satellite, even though they're in the United States, are a great way for people from, say, Japan to start talking to people from Canada, right? I mean, we serve the global industry and we provide opportunities for those dialogues to happen.
And do you see this emerging in kind of I know you talked about rocket capability being stood up, but there is kind of dichotomy in types of technology that are being invested in. It seems that America is investing heavily in new technology such as space domain awareness, rendezvous proximity operations. We're seeing companies like Lodestar for Astra stood out to do space defense, which hasn't been a need in previous years, but largely seems spurred by competition with China. Whereas it seems that Europe doesn't have that same level of competition. So it's more that they're standing up these capabilities that the US has already had, such as launch vehicles, synthetic aperture radar. We're seeing heavy investment in thermal infrared imaging, which is key for missile defense, which, as you mentioned, Golden Dome is specifically focused on. So are you seeing the same kind of change, like split in focus on technology and business showing up across different regions?
Yeah. And so it's a good point you make. There's growth in all different applications in different ways depending on what region you're from. And I don't see a single space-based or satellite application that doesn't have a growth market somewhere. Even on broadcast, which is probably the oldest commercial satellite market out there other than government, even that still has a thriving market in Asia, in the Middle East. Like, there's broadcast satellites still a profitable business, and bandwidth for broadcast is extremely valuable depending on where you are in the world. So the one thing that's exciting about the satellite and space industry is there's no shrinking markets. There's nothing that's retreating. Everything is building up on different levels in different regions.
Sure.
And that creates a wide variety of investments, and also means that I can't possibly create a conference program that covers everything. It's a challenge. You mentioned space domain awareness, space situational awareness. I mean, that's a whole conference. Like, that's a whole group of companies, a whole group of investors, the whole policy discussion, and you have to put these things together in a way that makes sense. But there's robust discussion, investment, potential customers, and activity and innovation in all of those markets. So the trend is that everything is experiencing sort of different levels of innovation and evolution at different rates. So it's exciting. It's really real. There's nothing that is stagnant right now.
Yeah.
It's a rising tide across the board, as we've seen.
And I know you kind of mentioned that you take signals from, well, you're saying from other conferences. You had mentioned that you're taking signals from like what the government's interested in. I know Golden Dome's a big one. So I'm kind of curious, how do you shape each year's conference to what you want to learn about versus balancing it with just leaving it open? Because there's a lot of trends coming into this year that I know people are going to be talking about. Like orbital data centers is probably the big one on the commercial side. Government military has Golden Dome, but they've had this recent announcements that's like looking for commercial suppliers for space domain awareness. And we have big shifts on the civil side with Isaacman's new administration making huge adjustments to our lunar and interplanetary plans. So how do you kind of take all of these signals and use that to shape who's speaking at your conferences, what the focuses are of the keynotes, versus just leaving it open so that kind of have new conversations emerge out of it?
The conference program is largely community built, and that's through a lot of different processes. The first is we open up a call for proposals and papers for the entire conference. And this happens around June. We have all different types of those programs too. So there's people that submit for our technical program, which is peer evaluated by an advisory board, so that we get a balance of relevant technologies and also technologies that are at critical stages. So we have our tech seminar program that every presentation is based on research that has been peer evaluated. And then we try to get a diverse range of technologies. And then we also try to make sure that the presentations themselves are discussing key milestones or key developments in those technologies. And then on the business program side, we have not only that call for proposals, which is evaluated by myself, my team, and also our partners. We have partner organizations from a wide range of space and satellite nonprofits that develop programs with us, like the Satellite Industry Association, GSOA, as well as we have a finance forum that's put together by partners that we have at analysis firms like Analysis Mason, Nova Space. We also have a startup space competition, which we bring in applications through that. And those entries are judged by myself and our startup space judges and our co-director Rafferty Jackson, as well as our industry partners on that JSAT. So that process is very complicated, involves a lot of different people and collaboration, but it's not just me filling in a box and saying this is what this is, because I don't know. Like I was on another podcast recently and I said, I don't know the answers to the industry. Like my job is to learn myself. Like if my conference isn't educating me, then it's not very useful. So we try to have the community build the program so that they can ask the questions and also solve the problems they want to solve. It takes up a large chunk of my year. It's a very hard and difficult, but also rewarding process because I learn throughout it. And then when I go to my show, I'm excited to hear these presentations and learn and be able to take that knowledge and start building next year's program so that we have conversations that continue. It's I wish there were an easy way to do it, but it is not easy. And it does involve a lot of collaboration.
Well, you know what everyone says, space is easy. So makes sense.
Famous mantra of the industry.
Yeah. I mean, this industry, we've got a lot of brilliant people in this industry at all levels, not just, engineers, but also the executives, also the people who are marketing the industry, also the people who are, directly involved in sales. Everybody has a level of brilliance that when you bring them together, you can tell there's a passion to move these things along. And there's an investment with our show where people want to have a productive and educational week, which is great. In some trade shows, you can go in some industries and the primary concern is competition. They just want to go up on stage and sell something and look better than the other person. And I'm just glad that we have an industry. Yes, there's competition, don't get me wrong, but there's also this excitement and passion to continue to defy physics in a way that creates programs or creates applications like direct to sell. To make those things real, it requires a lot of different collaboration for different people at different levels across the industry. So
yeah, it's a great point because you're also the executive editor for Via Satellite. And I wanted to get your take on kind of what's the media's relationship to the space sector. I know you write about other industries as well, so I'd like to understand how space requires kind of a different approach to reporting.
Yeah, well, Via Satellite magazine is business to business, the B2B publication. So its readership is we're really informing everyone along the supply chain what's happening, so that not only do investors or people outside of the industry know what's going on, but also so our competitors know what's going on, partners know what's going on, and so that's kind of an interesting position to be in, because you're talking about a lot of the space industry is not yet publicly traded, but it's growing. There's a lot more of the space industry that's going to be put on. It's going up for IPO. There was a wave of it during the pandemic. It's a very unique experience from a journalism point of view to cover the industry, because it is still largely private. And what was specifically the question you asked about my role?
My question is kind of how do you see media fitting into it? Is it mainly just a report on the news and what's happening, or is it shaping kind of the conversations that are happening? Do you I notice a lot of space media is not often criticizing space, but really just hyping it up. So it does seem like there's a different kind of relationship between media and the industry. Is that something you've seen over the past 2 decades?
Okay. No, I understand. Okay. So a lot of space journalists have been exclusively space their whole career. So this is the industry they know. And because the space industry and the satellite industry are such long-term industries, you're going to be covering a project like a satellite launch, for example, across many years. And you're going to get to know the people who have worked on these things for many years. So there's naturally this sort of, if you go to a satellite launch, like as a human being, you don't want to see these things fail. You don't want to, you want everything to succeed because it's been such a long-term project. And the people involved. I will say that as the space industry and satellite industry moves more into the public domain through IPOs, I think that coverage is going to change. You're going to see a lot of people migrating from other likewise industries and starting to cover space. So you're going to see, you're already seeing it now with telecommunications, the cellular industry. You're seeing people who have covered that industry now covering space, and kind of wondering, why is this industry move so slow, or being a lot more or critical. I am proud of the fact that my colleagues Mark and Rachel, who also work on via satellite, we are very, when it comes to our coverage, we're calling the shot. Like we're just writing down, like we're sports reporters almost. Like we are cataloging action. Like we're putting up projections on a board and saying this is what's been projected and this is what's happened. We try to be as objective and also realistic as possible. Like the realism is very important in the industry because it's very easy to get swept up in hype. Yeah. It's very easy to report from a bias that you are also, you're a big fan of space technology. You're a big fan of the space program. And it is easy to get swept up in that. It's also easy to be overwhelmed by the technology, and also easy to be, to think, oh, people building rockets are super intelligent, and I am like privileged to hear what they have to say. But those people are often wrong. Like they're all human. And like, you're right, space is hard and it's not an easy industry, and you are going to fail more often than you succeed. The successes are huge though. And like, whenever humans defy physics and create some other application, that's a fantastic thing. But it does require a lot of trial and error, and it does require somebody. And it's even more important now if a lot of these space companies go public. Now you have to start educating the general public, not just the government or a small set of end users. You've got to educate the general public. So right. You've got to bring like your retail investor now into the mindset that, SpaceX isn't the only launcher out there, or, there's a lot of different global constellations out there that are serving specific markets. Like a satellite launch failure is a big deal. It's a huge setback, and this is what you will see impacted by it. Even though we're launching at a higher cadence now, a launch failure still puts an entire business model back at least a few months, and that's a big deal. I would highly recommend that you guys get Rachel Jewett, who's our senior managing editor, or Mark Holmes, our editorial director, because they have a very unique approach to covering the industry. I am not in my role as much on the day-to-day covering the industry. I'm more behind the scenes. I also edit the podcast and host their webinars. So I get to like drill down deep on one specific topic, whereas Rachel is like covering the entire industry every day. And she's incredible and amazing at it. And I really do suggest that you get her on this show sometime in the future.
But even from your perspective, with as you noted, the growth in public space companies, has that changed like the editorial thresholds for what you guys report on? Has it shifted kind of how much research or due diligence you have to do before reporting on something?
it adds another layer to our consciousness of who we're writing for. So in some ways, it'll impact the way we describe a quarterly report, for example, but it won't impact the amount of research you have to do or the amount of people you have to talk to or call, and get, the amount of phone calls you have to make. It's more than ever. And it will always continue to grow because these applications are getting more and more complex. It's not as simple as it was even 10 years ago.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, so one of the things that we've definitely seen, and that you sort of alluded to, is that as the space industry has sort of matured and grown, as the new space economy has matured and grown, it's gone from an industry followed by enthusiasts and specialists in the space to one that has become much more public facing. And so you've already alluded to the substantial educative barriers that need to effectively be sort of knocked down from the operating, the entrepreneurial, and from the investing sides of things. There are often some fairly steep barriers to getting everybody on the same page when it comes to fundamentally aligning and solving the problems that need to be solved. Just because, oh, this is space, that is not my particular cup of tea. I've never looked at it before. How have you found sort of the I'll say the responsibilities or the burdens on the media's side of things for sort of accepting that shift of responsibility?
Okay, so you brought up a few points. First of all, like the barriers to entry into the space industry. There's a lot of different ways you can have that conversation. First of all, like there are a lot more young people involved in the industry who are employed in the industry because of the barrier to being educated to a level where you could work in the industry is also that's also a barrier that's been torn down. But general awareness for like the public in terms of educating them on how the space industry functions, and the responsibility of journalists to make people publicly aware is significant, but it's also on. There's also a lot of responsibility for that sort of general public education on the space companies themselves. Journalists can only tell a story of what happened, but a really important story that space companies need to tell is why they're doing what they're doing. That's one thing a journalist can't do. They can't write in their report, well, like for example, like Northrop Grumman did all these things, but this is why the company exists. This is why they're doing these things. The company, the people who are building the rockets and satellites need to tell the story of why they're building it. And like, what happens to the general public when these services come to market. And that's a thing I think you're seeing more and more now, where you have like a big moment. It was like that SpaceX T-Mobile commercial during the Super Bowl, right? Like that one commercial probably was more effective than like 10 years of like media reporting on the space industry, just because people are like, oh, so my cell phone now can like talk directly to a satellite. Like people then are suddenly aware of how satellites are, function in our daily lives. Like people use GPS and maps. They've been using them for years, but they don't like visualize the satellites. The satellite's always been invisible. That's like I could talk about this for hours, but I mean, yeah, these are things that like journalists, and we've got a lot of really talented space journalists in the industry. We say, how do we tell the story in a way that the public will understand? And also, how do we convey the stories that the companies themselves want to talk about when they say their mission? Like, this is our mission to do this. It's something that we think about and talk about every day. And it's also things that we hope will attract another wave of journalists and storytellers to the industry, because it's constantly getting better. It's constantly improving, and we're seeing more and more people covering this industry. It'll be interesting to see how the future develops.
Absolutely. So, to apply a centuries old framework to it, like, it sounds like you would say that sort of journalism and the media more broadly has sort of a responsibility to report and catalog sort of the who and the what, maybe the where, maybe the when, but that specifically the why, that responsibility pretty much falls with the space companies themselves. And, I think we could probably debate as to sort of where the how would sort of fall into that. But it sounds like you would sort of argue that the space companies themselves, that the folks sort of leading the industry from the inside, are the ones who really need to be articulating, most importantly, the why this is so important, why this is so critical, why this is worth getting excited about, and why this is worth standing up and cheering about. And that, the media can sort of help with that a little bit, but it's certainly not something that the media is really able to do.
Right. And that's it. That's why people in the marketing and PR in the space industry, it's a thankless job. Like, no one ever gives them credit, but they have a really important job, and it's hard. It's really, really hard. And I give a lot of credit to those people who are trying. If you're getting hired as, like, for example, like a external communications director at a space company, it's not like there's a college or educational program that's like dedicated to PR communications for the space industry. Maybe there are, and like if there are, that's awesome. But they're coming into it from like you're going to tell the story of this company. They have to like go around their company and learn what everybody does. They got to learn about what these things do and how they're built, and then they've got to present it in a way that is interesting. And if they're going to be publicly traded, they've got to change their whole sort of mindset on that, because then they've got to think investor relations, public relations. But the space industry historically has been very conservative with the way they communicate, because most of them depend on U.S. government contracts. So you've got to be very like direct to the point. I mean, you're promoting visual products. If you're a satellite company, like, your visual product is invisible. Like, you don't have a physical, like, you can show the satellite in the lab, but it doesn't look like anything that people like, you can't look at it and be like, oh, I know I know what a solar array does, and I know how that converts power to the satellite bus. No, like, no one knows. It looks like a box, and then like it gets launched into space. But what I'm seeing is, as marketers and communicators get more talented in the industry, I do think it is influencing some of the designs within space industry to like look more appealing, but also to like convey the sort of sense of like future form factor, like things that are smaller, like, things that are things that look like they're moving technology forward. So yeah, I mean, it is telling that story and educating the public involves those marketers and communicators in the industry. Thankless job, they never get any credit, but are really, really doing one of the most important jobs, I think, out there.
Yeah. So this has all been great. You obviously know your stuff when it comes to the industry, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how that plays out at the conference. But to kind of bring it back to the conference, what are you most excited about this year? And maybe follow up to that, like, what do you hope comes out of this conference, like partnerships, deals, funding, anything like that?
Well, I'm going to say this just because I just got off of our prep call for the tech seminar. I'm really excited about the tech seminar program. Over the next few years, I want satellite to become more of a place where people trade technical information and share and collaboratively solve those technical problems by sharing research. I don't want to just I think giving a space for somebody to put up a poster is great, but I think giving them a stage and like 100 and some people to talk to for 25 minutes and just show their research like a classroom is extremely valuable. I think it's just as valuable as a panel of executive leaders, because these kinds of collaborations are really what's going to get technology moving. I'm really excited about that. I'm really excited about our GovMilSpace program this year, because last year with the administrative change and some confusion about whether or not government employees could attend conferences, that's been cleared up, and I'm excited to see them come back to the show this year. I know that was a weird transition year, but I'm really excited to see how we're way ahead of in attendance on the government military side compared to last year. So I'm really excited to see them. We have some really, really great keynotes. I'm looking forward to hosting Taylor Jordan, who's the new director at the Office of Space Commerce. I'm really looking forward to seeing what SDA has to say. I'm looking for. We just confirmed Bridget Mendler,
Northwood.
Northwood, who's going to be our closing keynote. We've got our. I'm looking forward to we've got our 10th anniversary of our startup space competition. We've put more than 120 startups through this entrepreneur pitch contest, where like some of our first competitors in this contest are now like market leaders, like Orbit Fab and Leo Labs and Astroscale. These are all companies that applied to like participate in this competition, this Shark Tank thing that we've been doing for 10 years now. And this is our 10th anniversary, and a lot of people who have participated in that competition are coming back to see it. So I'm excited to see all of them again as well. There's a lot going on, and we're within a few weeks now, so I'm getting close.
Very nice. Well, congratulations. I know that Harrison and myself are both really excited to attend and to go there and to be as supportive and engaged as we can be. But Jeff, again, thank you for your time. Close us out with what you need. How can we or our audience members do the most to help you, to help SAT Show, to help out everything that you're working on these days?
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. I was given a code to give to your listeners. If you want to register for the satellite show, you can get a discount on it. So our website is satshow.com, SATSHOW.com. And there's a code that you can use to register. It is space 012. So lowercase letters, space 012. If you use that code, you can get a discount on registration. And, we have, if you want to just come see the exhibit hall, it's a 90,000 square foot exhibit hall. It's huge. We would love to see you there. If you're in the engineering tech field, like I said, we have this special program for you on our tech seminar. Got something for everybody there. Visit the website, check it out, and come join us. And we hope to see you there.
Awesome. Well, we can't wait. Hope to see you there, Jeff. And again, thank you so much for joining us for this interview.
Thank you so much, Harrison. I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you, Paul. Good talking to you guys.
Pleasure to meet you, Jeff. Thank you again so much for joining the show.